Hello, Little Justice leaders. I am so excited to be back with another great conversation today. I'm Shelby. I am the creator of Little Justice Leaders. In case you don't know, at Little Justice Leaders, we help schools and educators center social justice in schools for young people. We work with preschools through middle schools to help create a culture of social justice. And today we are talking to someone who is an incredible educator. Our special guest is Laura Roettiger, and Laura is a reading specialist and award-winning elementary educator. She weaves her passion for STEM learning and fostering kindness into writing stories for children. She now is focusing on her writing for children, working in environmental education, and mentoring new teachers at a STEM school. She is also the author of two picture books, which we will be talking about today. So, welcome, Laura. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Shelby. Thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to write? Maybe tell us a bit about An Accidental Hero, your children's book, and what inspired you to write it.
Sure. I moved here to Colorado after being a teacher in the city of Chicago. And in 2016, when I moved here, while the moving truck was being loaded, I received a 911 reverse 911 call that my house was being evacuated. So my introduction to Colorado was immersed in wildfires. 8 homes burned to the ground that day during that fire. It was the Cold Spring Fire. And it's always been part of living here in Colorado. And so the first people I met, my house was fine, by the way, but the first people I met in one of the writing groups that I joined had been one of the Denver Post reporters on that fire. And she and her animals had been evacuated. And a lot of people that I first met were in that shock of being evacuated. So it was something that was tangible. And the children that I was working with when I first got here were in an environmental education program. So it was important for me to learn about how that worked. And I became certified in the Wildfire Partners um, in Boulder County so that my home could be mitigated for wildfires. And so that was something that was really important to me as I got here. And it, informed my living in the mountains. And my first house was actually in the national forest. So it was important that I understood how all of this worked. And so when the fires in Australia happened in uh, December of 2019 and January of 2020, that was on the news every single day. And I was watching the animals, on the news every day. And I knew the students where I was at that point were seeing it. And it was a horrifying story. And children, I mean, everybody I know really, loves animals. But it was devastating. And when I saw the true story of rescuers discovering other species in the burrows, that was how I knew there was a story there to share with children that would provide comfort. And that was really important to me. So I felt that it was something that I wanted to write.
I love
So,
that. And it's such a beautiful story. So for those who haven't read it yet, An Accidental Hero tells the story of a wombat who saved other animals during a wildfire or helped kind of house and support other animals during a wildfire. You talked a little bit about kind of the love for animals, but what drew you to this story in particular?
well, I really like sharing stories that have, that have a lot of science in them, but also there's, everything I've written so far has fictional elements, but a lot of facts woven in. So as a teacher, when I'm sharing something, I like to have a lot of layers in the books that I'm reading to students so that there's cross curricular and all of those things. And this story just had so many elements of there's hope in it, and there's kindness and friendship. And what is a hero? That so when I present to students, we talk about what is a hero, and it's just such it's such an important question. And how can you be a hero? A hero doesn't have to be, a Marvel figure, which I think is sometimes what is the first thought. We can all be heroes. We can be heroes in different ways. And so I think that's really the most important thing. And I felt really confident that children would relate to it and when I was writing it. And that is actually what has happened. So
Yeah,
it's
I'm
been
not
very
surprised.
gratifying. Yeah,
Yes, no, I'm not surprised because um, it's just such a beautiful story. It's such an interesting story. I love that you've been able to kind of weave your passion for STEM and science with a love for animals and an interest in wildfires and telling those stories and educating young people. It's just such a beautiful kind of thread of themes coming together.
hmm,
And I'm curious, we know like wildfires can be a very scary topic for kids, right? It can
right.
be a scary topic for adults, but can be very scary for young people. How do you think about balancing telling the truth about wildfires and the reality of, what a wildfire is, while keeping a story, reassuring for young people?
Right. Well, one of the things that I think is important is that we listen as adults. So when a child has a fear of something, letting them express what they're afraid of is the most important part. So if we think we know what they're afraid of and we talk about a lot of other scary things and that's not actually what they were afraid of, we've created new fears. So starting out with hearing what they're talking about and then trying to help them through those fears, that's the first part. So if they're afraid that they're not going to be home when a fire starts and that how am I going to find you again? Okay. That's the first step. So one of the big things where we live is as families have a plan. Where are we going to meet? How do we have a to-go bag? That's a big thing here, right? So those sorts of things are the first step if you live in a place where there's a danger. Do we have a meeting place? Do we have a way to find each other? So those are the big things. In the book, what happens is the there's one page where because it's told as a newscast, there's one page where you see the fire, and that is a little bit, it's definitely the scary part. But most of the book takes place after the fire. So it's Kangaroo is the field reporter interviewing Wombat, and you see the aftermath of the story of the fire, I'm sorry, in the story. So I think it's really important that we don't shy away in the book from that scary piece, but the majority of the book is the aftermath of the fire. And I've heard from people who've read the book, reviews and so forth, is that it's a reassuring book to children about the scariness. That was my large animal going from underneath my desk. If the room was shaking, it's not an earthquake here. Um, the aftermath of the fire. So it allows them to feel that scary piece, but then the reassuring piece is the majority of the story.
Yeah, I love that. And so, kind of along those lines, I'm curious what messages or lessons you hope that children will take away from the book.
Right. So that was really important to me that the main lessons are helping your neighbor because wombat and I used as much as I could the true facts of the story. The only animals that are in the burrow are the animals that were actually found and rescued, that rescuers found in the burrow. And wombats are solitary. They don't actually interact with other animals. So these were strangers. These were not the friends that wombats actually would have known. So they go out at night looking for food. And when so the wombat wasn't, and Wombat even says, I never knew these other animals, but now they're friends. So the fact that we introduce that in the story is helping strangers, right? So those are things that I wanted to share in the stories, that we can help other people even if we didn't know them before.
It's such an important message, I feel like, especially now as there is so much division,
Yes,
in our world. And I think just this idea of we can know our neighbors, we can support our neighbors, we can support people we don't even know, like stepping in and being that hero, being the person who can, give and accept help when needed. I think is just such an inspiring story for young people,
thank you.
especially at this very moment.
Exactly.
Yeah. And of course, we're talking about a topic that's heavy and important. So we know that many young people, especially if they're in an area that might be prone to wildfires, likely have some fears that we've been talking about, right? So what advice do you have for parents and educators on how to lead and have these conversations?
Right. Well, I think knowledge is power. So I think talking to children about this, um, so that they know that they have that power, that they have a to-go bag. And if something were to happen, what would be important to take? So one of the things when I first moved here, someone said to me, the most important thing to make sure you have, obviously, your pets. The first things, of course, that you think of, you have your pets, you have medicine, you have your important papers and so forth. Although much of that is now digital, the papers. The things that I thought were really interesting, that people who had been through this several times before, when I had first gotten here, take your laundry, your dirty clothes, your hamper, because those are the clothes you've just worn. You know they fit, they're the right season, and you like them. Things like that. And if you talk to, so, right, it's not the clothes that you wore, 2 years ago that maybe don't, especially if you're a child, that maybe don't fit anymore. And for children, what is precious to them? There was an article at the end of February in the New York Times that interviewed several children that had lost their homes in LA, and the things that they took. And it ranged from, some of them had taken pets, some of them had taken stuffed animals, and one had left a stuffed animal that she didn't realize that she wasn't going to get to go back to her home. And it was heartbreaking. And one had, it was a pair of basketball shoes, and just talk to your child about, if this were to happen, what is precious to you? What would you need me to grab? What would you want to put in a bag, so that they feel like they have had some say in it? And I think that's really important, because again, it's about the listening to them and what they think is important.
Absolutely. And I love that. That's something we're talking about all the time at Little Justice Leaders is like we need to talk to young people about the issues that are happening in the world. It becomes less scary, it becomes less confusing, less complicated,
Right.
when we as adults can help guide and help them navigate those conversations. When we don't talk to them, what happens is misinformation,
Right.
fear, bias, confusion, and a lot of information coming from sources that we don't even know they're getting information from, right? Whether that's the internet or other kids. Older kids in the neighborhood or at school who maybe are getting misinformation on the internet. So just lots of variables. So I think, as the parent or the caregiver or the teacher, being able to guide these conversations is just so crucial at a time when there's so much access to information that can be so scary for young people, especially if they're seeing, news stories about wildfires, but nobody's talking about it. The fear can really build. So thank
Exactly.
you. I love that advice so much. Let's say that folks, go out and buy An Accidental Hero because you absolutely should. It's an amazing book. Whether you are in an area of that's prone to wildfires or not. I think it's just a beautiful story. I think it's a great way to talk to kids about an issue that matters. Actually, a number of issues that matter. So we're talking about things like wildfires, obviously. We're talking about climate change can be weaved into this story,
Definitely.
issues of animal rights and animal protection, and of course, community resilience, mutual aid, working together, supporting one another. All of
Right.
those themes come through in this book. So let's say folks go out and get the book. How can they use this kind of as a conversation starter for some of these important topics?
Right. Well, I have a lot of, there's in the back, there's 4 pages of back matter. And so two of the pages are about the animals in Australia. So that's, a wonderful science lesson. And because Australia was, off by itself with that and the islands around it. There, a lot of those animals aren't found anywhere else in the world. So there are, the marsupials and then the monotremes, which a lot of people have never even heard of monotremes. So, which are like echidna is one. And so there's 4 pages. Those the 2 pages that are about the Australian animals. I'm just holding it up so you can see. And then there's also but the pages about the wildfires that are also you. I've got my dog is right here. He thinks he's part of the show here. Um, there are my note is about the wildfires here. So I was here when the Marshall Fire happened, which was in Boulder County. There were 1,000 homes that burned to the ground. And that was 3 years ago. And there are still many people who never were able to rebuild. It was by dollar amount the biggest fire in in this area um, that happened. And now, of course, with LA, that's exponentially bigger. I don't know the numbers, but the amount of people who were displaced and the number of homes and amount of people who were underinsured here and then in LA, it's huge. It's much bigger there. And there's been things on the news in LA since the LA fires about people who, because of being underinsured, that will not be able to rebuild. So that's a really challenging issue. And so about the thing that I think that it's it's hard to talk to children about this, but about, why we're moving. And that's part of that is climate change. And so I think that's an important subject. And I mean, I don't know why climate change is a political topic because it's science. I mean, it's a reality. So I'm not being political when I talk about this. I hope that doesn't seem like a political topic to you.
It shouldn't
It,
be.
thank you. I think that's an important topic. So, a climate scientist did endorse the book. It's on the back cover, where she talks about that, and I can read that to you, if you're interested. But in the book, I have 4 facts about forest fires and 3 tips to help prevent them in the back matter.
That's amazing.
So, and they were, vetted by wildfire partners here and fire in Boulder County. I actually don't live in Boulder County any longer, but um, by the firefighters here. I one of the things that I was told after the Marshall Fire was fire season is 365 days a year. Now, it used to be a certain time of year. It wasn't winter, and the Marshall Fire was December 30th. So, yeah. So the point I'm trying to make is that's part of climate change, is that we had a very dry fall, and the snow came a day, maybe 2 days after the fires. So that's what happens.
Absolutely. So I think, this book is such a good resource for whether you're teaching young people explicitly about climate change and you want to use this as kind of a way to weave the story and make the story relatable and connect, make them, help them understand the impact, whether you're talking about wildfires directly and can talk very, directly about that topic, or you're talking about community connection,
Right,
helping, supporting one another, of course, depending on the ages, the background knowledge of your learners, I think you could approach any of those topics and actually more with
right,
this specific book and using that as a resource. Animal rights, of course, and animal protection too, I
right,
think would be a big one
right,
for this. And it sounds like the back matter has everything a teacher or a parent or caregiver might need to get started and dive into some of these conversations. So
right,
it's
right. I mean, it opens up the conversations.
yeah.
And then just for straight up science, talking about the animals in the
Mhm.
book is, there's a lot of interesting animals in the story and
Yeah.
ways to compare and contrast. And those were all kinds of things that I always enjoyed doing when I was, either a classroom teacher or working, mostly with, younger children. Right now, I'm not in the classroom. I've actually been volunteering at the library
Oh, nice.
and yeah, at the public library and doing some tutor training
Okay.
recently.
Great.
Yeah. So I've been sort of shifting out of, classroom roles
Mhm.
and so forth. But the my teaching roles have evolved a little bit,
Yes.
particularly since the pandemic and
Hmm.
going back into a classroom has been a little bit harder to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I am glad you're still educating in various ways
Yes,
and educating the
absolutely.
community, and you're out there building those connections and sharing this story because it's such a beautiful story and such an incredible resource that can be used to teach so many different topics, so many angles from multiple subject and points of view. So
Thank you.
I love it. We highly recommend this book. It's such a beautiful resource. So Laura, can you tell us? Well, first of all, I would love for you to just show the cover, just so
Yeah,
folks
sure.
make
And
sure that you're getting the right book, and just because it's so beautiful and cute. I really love
and
the
Debbie
cover art.
Palin is Debbie, sorry.
Yeah, no,
Debbie
go ahead.
Palin is the illustrator
Hmm.
and she did a marvelous job. And
Yes.
I love the color palette. And that's another thing as we were and typically the illustrator and the author of a book don't meet, but our editor decided that that would be a good idea. And so we had several Zoom meetings, and she and I had been sending books back and forth or different ideas of other books and color palettes. And are several books about this particular fire out
Hmm.
that came out ahead of ours. And many of them have more like that are all earth tone, I would
Yeah.
say, or fire, they're more in the orange and look like fire.
Hmm.
And we wanted something that was a little bit more soothing. And I think Debbie really nailed that in terms of this book doesn't have that scary look to it,
Hmm.
which we wanted something that had more of a reassuring look.
Yeah.
So you can see from the cover, she really hit that. And I love that it's, the beautiful night sky and then all of the other animals. You can see them
Yeah.
on the cover really add to that. Um,
Absolutely.
how much they're enjoying, the hero right there,
Yes.
Wombat
Yes.
in
She
the front.
definitely did a great job. I
Yeah.
love the illustrations.
And then I'm just going to show you
Yeah.
here we have because when we go in this is the front, this is the first
Oh,
spread.
yes.
We've got koala and emu are the newscasters.
Yes.
And
Love
when
it.
I first just was figuring out how to write this, when you think about Australia, the animals that were in the burrow are not the animals that you think of as an American audience. And I wanted the main animals that we think of as Australian, koala, kangaroo, emu. Emu is the national bird of Australia,
Oh,
to be in the story. So I
yes.
thought, how do I incorporate that and keep the true animals that were in the burrow?
Yes.
So by making it a newscast, I was able to include those animals without it being far-fetched. So that's
Yes,
what I did.
that's so sweet.
And and the newscast made sense to me
Hmm.
for a lot of reasons. And a lot of people have picked up on that. So
Yeah.
it was a nice structure that worked well for a lot of reasons, and it's been well received. So that's been good. And talking about the news, that's another topic in terms of social justice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Responding to current events and talking about
Exactly.
how reporting happens. There's another, conversation you
Yes.
could start from that. Like what was
Yes.
the reporter's perspective as a kangaroo or something else. So I think, yeah. So many themes we can dive into in just one book. So where can our community get the book and how can they support your work?
Yeah. So the publisher, Ifric Publishing, is offering free shipping if you use, and you'll have this on I guess on your
Yeah, I'll put this in the
in the
description.
notes. Okay.
Yeah.
If you use the code Justice, you can get free shipping. So that's a wonderful opportunity. And then otherwise, you can, I mean, the book is available otherwise, but if you order it from her website, um, that's a really great way to support the book um, and support independent publishing. So that would be the preferred way to get it, and that's available as far as I know with that code indefinitely. So and then my other book, which is also from IFRIC, I'm not sure if she'll honor that code with Aliana, but this is my other book, which is also a STEM book. Aliana Reaches for the Moon. And I don't know, I mean, the book is available through bookshop.org and
Okay.
other ways too. So
Great.
thank you.
Great. Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you for that generous offer. So we all can go get that book and, get free shipping, which is always really fun and
Yes.
exciting. And also check out your other book as well, which may or may not come with free shipping, but is still, I'm sure, worth it, worth getting. So Laura, thank you so much for your time today and sharing
Thank
this wisdom
you.
and insights. I know it's going to be so helpful for so many parents, caregivers, educators who want to dig into some of these tougher topics, and your book is just such an incredible resource for them to do that. So thank you for being here and taking the time to chat with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Shelby.